You just heard the Fear After from Evoken's Hypnagogia record. This is the Rock Metal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And this is once again our American Doom series. And that was...
this is the most extreme of the Dooms we've done, right?
This is... I'd say this is probably neck and neck with Winter, but this has a more...
contemporary edge.
Yeah, a little bit, I think. Hypnagogia is a little bit newer, although the Godin stuff was a little bit newer and stuff as well.
Which, I just got...
Didn't you just order the vinyl?
I just got it.
Did you? Nice.
It's a nice, beautiful, thick book,
Sweet.
As we say. Svart doing great work.
As usual. Yeah. But this is going to be a special one. Not only are we going to be joined by two members of Evoken, Vince, the drummer, and John, the vocalist and guitarist you just heard there on the Fear After, but here in a moment, we're going to be joined by Decibel's own Albert. Mudrian.
Albert Mudrian.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, I think we already recorded this part with him, and I asked him right away about the pronunciation, because I think I used to say Mudrian.
It's Mud.
But it's Mudrian.
Yeah, it's just like, think of Star Trek,
Or Primus, if you're a My Name is Mud fan. There you go. So we'll be joined by him very, very soon here. But we did want to talk about the opening song that you just heard, because I think it's a mood setter in a certain way. It's a song that kicks off the latest record, Hypnagogia there. To me, it's got this like perfect kind of intro to it. It's very Ennio Morricone kind of in a lot of ways, like kind of the mood of his scores that he did for, not just spaghetti westerns, but other exploitation movies and different things like that. And I think it's a perfect intro for new fans who are kind of new to this style of, I'll call it funeral laden kind of death doom. The term extreme doom will come up throughout this episode as well. And, you're hearing the monolithic riffs, but you're also hearing these like haunting violins. You hear this lilting, clean spoken words. You also get John's very like death guttural sort of screams. Suffocating atmosphere. You get these great keyboards that are lingering in the background. It's got real My Dying Bride, kind of Pentecost 3 anathema sort of stuff kind of floating through it. Killer breakdown riff about 5.5 minutes in. And then that riff at the end, like about the 7:20 mark, is just haunting. And so to me, it's like the whole kitchen sink of all the different kind of personalities that you get with a band like Evoken, kind of in one song.
Yeah, I feel like it's the last like 35 years of Doom condensed into like a nice, digestible package.
Yeah, and so if you like what you heard, I think you're in for it. And all we urge with this is just if you're into more traditional Doom, but you like the kind of level of discourse and conversation that we have. Well, we're bringing in a metal scholar himself as well, Albert, who's just as nerdy about this stuff, and probably for my money, at least the biggest Evoken fan I knew going into this, which is why we want him to kind of be a big part of it.
Yeah, one of the biggest proponents, and because Evoken had never have hit the kind of successes of some of these bands, but Albert was in a position where he could actually, push a band he loved.
Yeah.
Which is all we could any of us could hope for any of the endeavors.
Yeah, if you can use any leverage you have in life to expose people to cool shit, then we kind of talked off mic a little bit when we were kind of warming up, just kind of catching up with him, just about I just got back from cross country camp and just exposing kids to getting a whole car full of kids driving around into Dax rigs and graveyard. And it's a low bar.
Kids into anything
it's a low bar, but the fact that these kids even Fu Manchu, I had kids that are oh my God, Fu Manchu is awesome, and they're putting in their Spotify likes, and
that's awesome.
It was a good feeling. It's okay, I'm doing a moral good. It's only a few of these kids, but maybe it can matriculate from there to somewhere else.
Well, with in our culture, religion's kind of a thing that's going by the wayside. But I feel like what we're doing with music is proselytizing to the masses a little bit, to things that don't really have, the ethics aren't as hard and fast, but it's still as spiritually satisfying to really dive deep into these bands.
Well, and I think too with this doom metal series, what I've hoped for, and what I hope that when people look back on this, is they'll see a series of however many bands we end up covering. 10 being kind of the magic number. It's what we did the thrash series. But these are aural documentaries.
Yeah.
They're not visual documentaries, but like these are like audio podcasts that are essentially true documents, like Trouble. Like just listen to our 2 episodes, you'll know everything you ever needed to know about Trouble in like 2 episodes. It's like you could read, it's like the audiobook that for books that aren't really written about all these bands that are kind of like going on, but with the music sort of intertwined, with interview clips intertwined, and
with members of the bands that were there when things happened. It's I think it's I feel like it's almost something we like need to do for posterity to like record, because who knows how long any of us are going to be here, but for us to like do these extra things where we've got interviews with these bands that, you know, like I've never seen a winter interview before.
Yeah.
And we did a fucking 2-hour interview with Steven. So it was like these records that people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. But like, how much do you really know about it? And if you're curious, then we have a lot to tell you about it.
Absolutely. And so, let's do it. So let's introduce Albert here in a moment, and hopefully you enjoy all of the conversations. I think you will. There's some fun stories that are going to be told and things like that. So enjoy. So now we are joined by the great, esteemed Albert. Say your last name for people, because I've heard it mispronounced and pronounced many different ways, probably even by myself. So
yeah, I've heard you do that. Not as bad as you butcher that poor guy from Penance.
From Penance and Dream Death.
Yeah, but, I know. But it's Albert Mudrian.
Mudrian.
So,
okay. I say
Don't
mood sometimes.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Okay, I'll do. So this is from Decibel, and we are excited because we've heard your voice several times. You've joined us for like a talk set for our 200th episode. You've recorded little audio things for some of the bands that we've done the last couple years. But
At the Gates years and years ago.
Well, yeah, we first met for the episode 15 and 16, I believe, for the At the Gates reunion in New York. And then you've joined us for the Napalm Death. You helped curate a 2-part that. And you did our 150th episode, which is the Hard and Heavy Grind Crusher.
Yes.
Special episode.
My great contribution to the podcast.
that was a lot of fun to put together.
You know, I went back and re-listened to that, and that was a delight.
Yeah.
Does that hold up?
Oh yeah, it was a time in my life where I had nothing but time and no money, so it was just like a perfect vehicle to do this, and got to talk to all those people and stuff. It was wonderful.
Well, in a weird way too, it was like a portent into some of the bullshit we're doing now, where we're pulling in interview clips and making Mark's like editing life like horrid. So I'm just punishing Mark with every episode. Like, hey, here's some more weird shit to here have some sound clips and stuff. But so Albert, tell us kind of what you've been up to, plug away, different things that are sort of happening with the magazine, with any books coming out, like fests, all that kind of stuff. Go to town.
Where to begin? Well, we again, all of this is with the asterisk of pandemics and their potential effects, Delta variants, things of that nature. But
don't forget about lambdas either.
We got lambda now.
Too. Lambda.
Yeah, we want to call it the Revenge of the Nerds strain. So
Revenge of the Spike proteins.
Ogre's going to beat your ass. Yeah.
And the unvaccinated. Well, yeah, we have for the end of September, we doing the Decibel Metal and Beer Fest in Philadelphia, which
we will be at. Mark and I will be there.
Yeah, you guys are coming. It's good because it's sold out. And
wait, can we have free tickets? No, I'm just kidding. just
anybody that asks that this year can suck a dick.
Yeah, exactly.
But so that'll be the end of September. Really excited about that. Finally coming together.
And who are the big bands on that for the rare podcast listener that might have their head in the sand and not know what the hell's going on?
For that, we have Converge performing all of Jane Doe. Pig Destroyer performing all of Prowler in the Yard, Napalm Death performing cuts exclusively from Utopia Banished and Harmony Corruption, and a reunion of metallic hardcore legends Dead Guy who will play their first show in like 25 years.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
So that's pretty good. And then we are gearing up to announce the lineup to the Los Angeles version of Metal and Beer Fest, which will be in December.
Ooh, that's tight for you.
Yeah. That is tight because in between that, we send a book to print for Decibel Books that will be out in October. I can't really.
A yet to be unannounced one, right?
Oh, you can't reveal?
I can't reveal that one yet. That is,
Okay.
I can't remember if I told either of you what it is, but it's a band biography.
I think you did tell me in an email, but I won't say.
We'll
have,
talk after.
You made
but
it.
it's pretty awesome, and it's the author is turning in the manuscript within the next couple weeks, and we're shooting the band for the cover of the book over the next couple weeks too. So it's like got that moving. Decibel tour will be back in January and February of 2022. There's going to be 4 bands. We have them all locked in. Can't tell you yet because we can't announce that until October. Jesus.
So what good are you? Come on.
I'm just a big tease, really. I don't know, man. We're just busy. And we're happy to be busy with live events again. Hopefully everybody can stay safe and be responsible and just fucking get vaccinated. And hopefully we can put these, get these things off and people can have a good time. But obviously we're still making magazines nonstop. We go to print with issue 204 on Tuesday, which I guess is a week from today. With Carcass will be on the cover of that one. I'll give you these big reveals. Carcass will be on the cover of that one.
I figured they might be coming.
All right,
soon.
what's the Hall of Fame at least? Can you at least tell us that?
Yeah, I can. It's
actually by the time this episode drops, that issue will probably be out.
I was going to say that issue will be celebrating its year anniversary.
Yeah.
That'll be Warlock, Triumph, and Agony is the Hall of Fame in that.
Nice.
Which is a insane story of just tons of studio musicians and people who are credited as playing on the album, not on the album, and then people who are not credited actually on the album. And Adam Teppadellin wrote that one. And it's really super interesting, and it took a lot of kind of detective work for him to pull that together. But it's just
sweet.
It's
awesome.
Really cool. Who's the head? Undeath are the flexi disc in that one.
Okay, nice.
Who recorded a brand new song for us, and will have a record out next year. But they're pretty rad. I like their first record, but the new stuff that I've heard just destroys it. And tons more magazines, more books, more live events, more stuff that we think is interesting in our store.
Is your exclusive the Carcass album, is that sold out yet?
That's sold out in 2 or 3 days. We've got
that's the way I pre-ordered it. So
we have other vinyl variants in the store coming up, and we're going to be soon we're going to be recording sets from Metal and Beer Fest and kind of turning them into our own record releases.
Nice.
Which you'll be able to get exclusively through the site. So that's another project, and that's going to take some time because vinyl production, I don't know if you guys have heard, it's fucked up right now.
Yeah, it's way behind.
Dumpster fire right now.
Yeah. So, but we have we're not going to be pressing tons of records, so we'll be A-okay ultimately. But it's still it's just a regular Decibel thing where there's just a million different things happening at all times, but I can't complain because there's interest,
Sure.
So that's what's
You're like a multimedia kingpin right now. It's pretty awesome.
I would recommend everybody go out and buy Rotting Ways to Misery before that's gone, because it's a wonderful book I never thought I'd see.
I keep buying those things overseas, and then you guys keep putting them out. I need to have an inside track, Albert.
I've got both versions.
Hey, we're going to release that eventually, so don't worry about the
$30
import tags.
I don't think we don't have anything. I mean, we have books on the schedule through 2023 right now, but they're all Decibel originals. They're not
licensing
licensed versions. Yeah. I will say that we did an exclusive version of USBM with Dial for any listeners who are UK or European based or based in Europe. That you can now get USBM through Cult Never Dies without having to incur shipping from the US.
$27 shipping from the US.
Yeah.
Nice.
So you can get it straight from Dial for like, a reasonable UK rate.
And that's the book by Daniel, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a book by Dan Lakes.
Yep.
GSB. I'm super, super proud of that book. And yeah, that's most of
busy
it.
Busy man. And so how you got roped into this is I've reached out to you, kind of just talking about brainstorming what I was coming up with for here's my kind of short list of some of the bands that we were thinking about covering for this American Doom series. And do you have some contact info? And you kind of called me out and were like, hey, what about Evoken? And I was like, oh, you're not wrong. And I guess Funeral Doom or Death Doom's kind of stuff like that's as heavy as Evoken sometimes is, I think, off Mark and I's radar screen when we were first thinking about, Vitus and Trouble and you know what I mean?
This is more traditional and then kind of like we wanted to be more broad, I think, in general.
But I think like as this project sort of expanded and as you kind of, suggested Evoken and then we're like, well, let's throw Winter in there and let's really do this thing right. And then I reached out to you. I said, well, yeah, let's do Evoken, but you're the biggest Evoken fan I know. So why don't you do it with us? And at first you fought me on it, which was pretty funny. You were like, I don't know, like you and, you just have Chris on. That's fine for me. And I was like, no, dude, you're the Evoken guy. We'd love to have you. And you've done shows with us before. And then like a week later or something, or 2 weeks later, you're like, yeah, I'm on board. I changed my mind. So it was kind of a cool, maybe I caught you on a really stressful day and you were like, I can't take this stuff. So
no, honestly, I'm being sincere when I say I feel like you and Mark have a great rapport, and I think the listeners enjoy that. And I didn't want to mess with the flow, and here I am messing with the flow.
Here you are messing with the flow.
Well, thank you for that.
No, but we like having experts on when they can bring something special, and I think again, the reason we're doing a show like this, and the reason I'm a fan of Evoken is I can pretty much chalk up to you guys and Decibel because, they weren't really a band that were on my radar screen that much. I had Quietus back in 2001, but it just kind of sat in my CD rack and I didn't really pull it out very much because it wasn't a band I really thought much about until you guys started talking a lot more about them. And especially when Atramores and stuff like that came out, I was like, whoa, holy shit. And then I've just become a huge fan since then. And I don't know if it's because we're Midwest and you being kind of geographically like in that New Jersey, Philly kind of circle or what it was, but for some reason it was just something that was never really on my radar screen outside of the Quietus album, which must have gotten some hype at that point. Maybe I was like, I think I was buying stuff from Avant-Garde. I may even gotten service from Avant-Garde back then through Eclipse or something like that. That's maybe why I had that record. But yeah, so it's I just felt like you should be a part of a show like this because you're like the first person I think of when I think of like people who fly the flag for.
I don't think I gave them a whole lot of. I mean, I listened to a little bit, and then I saw the 100th issue show where they played, and then as we were leaving, I picked up. Albert was like, "Oh shit, I don't have any cash. Can you pick up that Crest Avoid and I'll pay you back tomorrow or something?" I was like, "Sure," and I bought one for myself, and that kind of started my Evoken buying habits. So,
did I ever pay you back? I don't remember.
I don't remember, but at this point, we're good. It was 100 some issues ago. We're all right.
It's been made up in some other ways.
I think it was like
promos.
No, actually, it was. I bought it from John. And I told him I wanted two, and I said, "Oh, I'm grabbing one for Albert." And he's like, "Oh, just take it." So he didn't charge me.
There you go.
So you owe John $20.
Okay, fair enough. He's never going to see that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Send him a birthday card or something.
So I guess what was your sort of introduction into the band before we kind of go into the band history and stuff like that? Where's your kind of entry point with these guys?
Oh, it's way, way, way back. And it's interesting because another friend of Decibel and a dear friend of mine and occasionally contributing writer, and I know that you guys have probably met him over the years, Scott Korber.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful man. Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful guy.
Scott. Scott knew those dudes like 93, 94. And he actually played in a band with them that kind of turned into Evoken eventually. This band called Asmodeus, which I believe
that was after they changed from Funerus to Asmodeus in '93. Yep.
Yeah, there's a brief period where Evoken started as Funerus, which was, you know, more deathy doom metal.
And it was just for listeners that don't know, it was basically just founded by Nick Orlando on guitar. And that original lineup, before Albert kind of tells his story, it was Rob Robichaud, bass and vocals, Phil Wilson on guitar, and then Vince joined Verke on drums. So then they kind of recorded like a rehearsal demo in '92, then changed their name to Asmodeus. I guess I didn't realize that Scott was part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Scott was ever considered an official member, but he definitely rehearsed with them several times. He drove out to Jersey from Pennsylvania. And I don't recall like why it didn't stick or whatever, but it certainly wasn't anything personal because, you know, he's friends with those guys for, you know, 25 plus years now, like to this day still. So we, you know, I kind of had a really early heads up on them, and it was, I guess it was like what, 94 that Shades of Night Descending came out.
Yeah.
And they
94.
they self-released it.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically like, you know, back in 94, it was still, I guess, essentially considered a demo, because, you know, it wasn't on a label per se. And we didn't think of it as a demo though, because nobody, like in 1994, bands did not have CDs that were demos.
Yeah.
You just had cassettes. So this had, you know, a cool cover and like real printing. I still have it, the version. It's like a 1-page panel. So, you know, there's nothing super high end about the graphics or the production values of the actual physical product. But we all got that because it was like, shit, you know, it was like, there's this band from America is playing this style of music that we adore, that no one else in America gives a shit about.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's this personal connection to them with one of, you know, my friends playing, you know, performing with them for a brief period. So it was just like, it was this band that, like, even if that demo EP, I mean, it's an EP in my brain, but like, even if that release wasn't great, you would have still like supported them and like really kind of been excited about them. But it turned out it was fucking great.
Yeah.
And it was this thing where it was like, my God, like this band actually stacks up to, you know, early My Dying Bride and early Anathema and early PL. This is a band that it isn't just like some band trying to ape that sound, because you know, back like 94, I was like fully immersed in like that death doom style. I wanted to hear as much of that stuff as possible. So I heard, you know, every kind of lame band like I heard every like shitty Sad Whisperings or Mythological Cold Towers, or, you know, like I heard every
hey, I've got that record.
B level. Mythological Cold Towers isn't that bad, but Sad Whisperings isn't that bad.
I read about it in Requiem magazine. That's where I bought it.
Stupid,
from these guys.
All these things that Chris would probably be a little too excited about at that time.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I acquired all of them because I just wanted as much of that stuff as possible. But to me, it was like Evoken was just that, you know, Shades of Night Descending was head and shoulders above that. So yeah, that was, as far as like Evoken proper, that was my first exposure to their music. And it's like, I mean, I still go nuts for that release to this day.
Yeah, it's great. And we'll hear a couple cuts from it coming up here. So basically they, to kind of fill in the gaps there, you know, Evoken, the name is taken in 94, the same year they put out the Shades demo EP, whatever you want to sort of call it. Mm-hmm. They take their name from Thurgathan's demo, which for the life of me, if either of you would like to try to pronounce.
I tried off mic, but it looks like it's some type of like Necronomicon thing.
Yeah, have you ever heard that pronounced properly before, Albert?
Probably by Scott Korber at some point, who has the demo tattooed on him. He literally has
Sothoth.
he has the demo cover tattooed on him. So if there's anybody who could
He
say
could do it.
Maybe we'll call him after.
Yeah, there you go. We should.
get him to record a special pronunciation.
And then 94 is kind of key too, because that's when John Paradiso comes in on vocals and guitars. And I think he played some of the keys actually on Shades, even though they'll later get other keyboardists. And then they bring in Bill Manley too. So Rob and Phil are out and Bill Manley comes in on bass. And I think it's important contextually, like you kind of hinted at it too, but it's like to set this scene for, you know, anybody that knows anything about Funeral Doom. I mean, this is like when Skepticism and Disembowelment were just kind of in the demo stages. Thurgathan was, you know, putting out demos. I mean, you had Winter, you had one My Dying Bride EP and one album by like 92, 93 when they're kind of getting formed. Paradise Lost was around. I mean, there wasn't really much in the landscape, especially in America, outside of like Winter, that was doing anything like this that I know of. I mean, maybe you knew some stuff on the East Coast because you were a little bit maybe deeper in that scene at that point. But I mean, it is such an anomaly for this band to sort of just emerge out of nowhere. I mean, how do you contextualize what was kind of going on in that time period with this type of sound?
I mean, the only other band that was kind of in America at the time who had anything similar was maybe Ceremonium. And they were in that same kind of, you know, New York, New Jersey area, because Evoken's area of Jersey was very close to New York. So, you know, they weren't from Philadelphia, New Jersey. They were more from, you know,
New York, New Jersey.
Gotcha. So, but you just didn't have like, I didn't even know about Ceremonium until probably like a year later, like Into the Autumn Shade of with those guys. I didn't hear like the demo and the EP that they had out in 93. Do
you know them, Mark? I don't know them that well. Is that something you and Chris came across?
I don't remember hearing it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was like, at that time, there's like Avernus from Chicago.
Yeah.
They were trying to do My Dying Bride type stuff. And there's a handful of others, but nothing that's stuck enough for me to care this long into.
Are they still, did they have much of a career outside that demo, Albert?
Ceremonium, they had 2 records, and the labels were like, I think one of them was called Fadeless, which was in the Netherlands or something. I don't even remember where the second one came on. But the second,
they're kind of hard to find then?
Yeah, they were
if you
obscure.
didn't know. Okay.
But they a few years ago, it was all, you know, everything's been reissued and you can get the full collection now. But
you have to check them
the
out.
second record was maybe had a little more of a black metal feel, less of a doom metal feel at times. But I mean, to your point about like the scene, there really wasn't one. Like it was just in America, like, man, like you couldn't, I mean, people forget like 94, 95, like that Music for Nations deal, with the Peaceville stuff was happening around then. And then the records, like the second and third records from like My Dying Bride and Anathema, the stuff like the post Caroline period when it was, when they were about to be distributed through Mayhem Fierce in the mid 90s, there was a lag. Like there was like 6 months to a year that records like, Silent Enigma or Pentecost 3 or Angel in the Dark River, that those records were out.
And you couldn't even get Silent Enigma in America it was hard as shit to get. I remember.
Yeah, we were so tough. Used to the like ordering mail order and waiting for 5-6 weeks that it didn't click. But yeah, looking back, like none of the stuff you couldn't go to a record store, and for most record stores you couldn't order it.
Yeah,
and those were the biggest bands of that style, and you couldn't. I mean, you mentioned like stuff like Disembowelment, which obviously was on Relapse, but by the time, really by like 94, 95, Disembowelment's done.
Yep. They're on the Trial of Bow.
Yeah. So like there's nothing that's like kind of carrying that over. And Thergothon, that record comes out in 94. They're done by then.
Yeah.
Like there's Winter's ostensibly done by the, like, so there's no scene. So, and the scene that existed just didn't even have any kind of, the scene that existed in Europe had little to no foothold here.
Well, it's weird too, because Vince even spoke to that, and I think I've heard other members, but he just kind of said like the U.S. wasn't really caught up to Europe as far as doom metal, and Vince has always thought that Europe was much more open-minded, and he even kind of, he said that people, when they were first signed to Adipocere before they put out their debut, people like thought they were French and stuff like that. Like, so it was just like,
they have a European sensibility for sure.
But it just shows how devoid of anything like that was going on in the States at that point. That like no one
like
even,
a couple hundred of us that like bought the stuff probably.
Yeah, it's very tough for those guys,
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's like, I mean, I don't know how, if you want to get too far ahead here, but like by the time, I mean, the first record, the first full length is Elegy that they're on, right? Who put that out? I mean, what was that? That was a New Jersey label?
I think so.
Like the just like, I mean, that's 98.
Yeah, it took them like 4 years to finally get something out.
By 98, there are plenty of established American labels that could have easily taken a chance. I do remember, I know that they sent stuff to, I mean, they definitely must send stuff to Relapse when they were like free agents, because I remember my friend who worked there telling me that he got stuff if I wanted to hear it at the time, like demos. And I was like, oh yeah. But like, but yeah, there was just, the interest was just so just low, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I guess for people, and Vince and John, by the way, will be joining us for some audio clips throughout the episode. I don't know if I've told the listeners that yet. And one of the questions I asked them was to talk about, like, do they think that they belong to the so-called funeral doom scene, or where do they see themselves sort of fitting? And I guess for people who are maybe new to this type of music, because this is probably the first episode that we've done where you can quote unquote say that this band at least like walks in funeral doom circles. How would you describe that music to like a beginner, or at least maybe somebody that has never really heard much funeral doom, in terms of what is different about it than maybe other doom?
I think that it's generally a pacing thing where funeral doom never really picks up beyond a certain tempo. And I know that it's easy to slip Evoken into that categorization, because they at times have some of those tenets with their sound, especially with kind of like a grand organ keyboard contribution to the music also. And I think a lot of people, associate skepticism with that, the whole organ sound. And then when you have like kind of like big, like kind of harrowing keys that come in, I think that people with slower tempos like that, I think people are just like kind of have that quick association. Well, oh, they're like skepticism, that's funeral doom. I mean, I've always considered them more of a doom death kind of band. And if you want to, you could really split hairs whether they're funeral doom, doom death, or death doom, whichever whichever you want to go with.
There's some weird Venn diagram that's out there that they fall into.
You can put them in any of them. I think that it's safer to just kind of qualify them as extreme doom, because I've heard, I've heard funeral doom bands who are like, strictly funeral doom, where it's just like nothing happens.
Yeah.
And, Evoken are a really dynamic band. And I think especially as the years wear on, and some of the stuff that we'll get, to later.
Yeah.
In like, hour 7 or 8 of the show, we'll
probably only 4,
yeah,
but
yeah.
Right.
But even like we started off with Fear After and kind of talked about that, you can kind of hear how dynamic they are just in a song like that from Hypnagogia,
right. And that's a huge evolution from, say, where their sound is even with, I don't know, maybe Antithesis of Light, where it's just like kind of just like
bleak,
bleak and cavernous.
yeah.
Where this is like there are just a lot of different shades that they're incorporating, and I think that so like I mean like you like the last two Evoken albums in particular. I don't think anybody can qualify them as a funeral doom band. But I mean anyway, for our first, for our audience who doesn't give a fuck about hair splitting, it's really slow doom.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, to me, what I got from doing research for this episode and really diving into this, and I think well, I'll get to it later, but I did write a question out later, which is how much Evoken is a safe amount to listen to in doing research for a show like this? Because it's like 6 straight hours of Evoken,
I think it's easier than 6 straight hours of Marduk.
Yeah, that's true. That's
because I remember listening to every record in an entire day.
Oh my god!
And I had a fucking throbbing headache, and I listen to shit all the time.
Yeah,
but that was too much.
But no, my big takeaway is how much more they have a foothold in like the so-called Peaceful 3 kind of stuff, and I think that's where people who maybe have an aversion to Funeral Doom or think that do I want to sit and listen to this episode? I think give it a chance. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that you heard with Fear After that's where this band kind of ends up with a warmer sound with more dynamic elements kind of happening and stuff like that. And I think even though they're drawing influence from Disembowelment and Thurgothan and things like that, they're more than that too.
Yeah, I think that there's an easier comp for Evoken is something like early My Dying Bride or early Paradise Lost than it is something like, I don't know, Worship.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's probably why I've kind of enjoyed their work later on, is because I've kind of like been on the same, upward kind of, evolving thing. Like the last record was just, I listened to the shit out of that record.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
But and it's actually stuff where bright you got, at points, which is weird. I mean, it's a dark subject matter, but it has some brightness and things like that. But
the more cavernous kind of monotony of some of the earlier stuff was just, it didn't catch me immediately. I appreciate it more now, but the last like 2 or 3 records are just, they're great. I pulled them up with a lot of the Bride stuff.
Well, one thing that we want to kind of get into here is the influences a little bit, and both Vince and John will speak to that. But I do have a quote that I found from Vince where he kind of tells a pretty cool memory, cool story. I think a lot of these probably are from Decibel issues that I culled through and stuff like that.
Your checks in the mail.
Yeah, there you go. But he says, I remember very clearly, like it happened yesterday, getting into Nick's car, and he said, I have this awesome demo. It's really raw, and it's something I've never heard before. So he put the tape in, and it was the Thurgothan demo. I remember thinking, my God, somebody's creating this. Are they even human? At the time, we were already influenced by My Dying Bride, Anathema, Paradise Lost, and Disembowelment. But when we heard Thurgothan, it coordinated with all of our other influences to give us Ascend. So, so they're drawing from that stuff. They're also like have name dropped Winter. The song we're about to play here in a second is from something that Mark was involved in. And certainly you can hear like Celtic Frost and some of those kind of influences too, which of course Celtic Frost influence, especially Anathema, but all the Peaceful 3 bands in huge ways.
And Winter heavily. Yes.
Yeah. Winter was bathing in Celtic Frost. So it's almost like you start the train there. I mean, you can go back to Sabbath if you really want to, and just kind of evolves and evolves. But this song that we're going to hear, Mark, maybe give us a little background, because you're intimately involved with this song, and how did this come about, this whole Celtic Frost tribute thing? And by the way, Albert, what does Tom say? Does he say Celtic or Celtic? I've always wanted to know.
Tom says Celtic.
Does Tom?
Yeah.
Because Jeff Wagner says Celtic. So I'm always like,
it depends on the what era you hear him talking. Like, definitely, like 30 years ago, I think you would have heard Celtic. Now it's Celtic. I'd probably go back and forth. If I have enough to drink, I'm sure it's just going to be Celtic.
That's all I say is Celtic. Celtic reminds me of the Celtics, and that's not metal. That's Larry Bird. Like
Larry Bird. So it's shit lip mustaches from French Lick, Indiana, my friend.
It's like a great rivalry between him and Magic Johnson. That's what.
Well, I was just curious if you had heard a definitive, because I've heard it pronounced so many different ways.
There was a thing that it was like a part of that Banger extreme metal episode where they had like some behind the or stuff that didn't make it to the final cut. And he actually asked him that question.
Oh, he did? Okay.
And for whatever it was, 5 years ago, was Celtic Frost.
Okay. Well, there you go.
I default to Celtic.
Yeah. It's always been my go-to. So
whatever Tom says.
Yeah, whatever. I go with that.
So Mark, this for people that, longtime listeners, Mark is a comic artist and other things and does illustrations for Decibel, which is how kind of Albert and Mark know each other so well. But this is part of a tribute thing that you were putting together for the band, right?
Yeah, I did a couple years before that. I did a Merciful Fate book, a bunch of like comics and quotes from musicians and stuff. Then when the Celtic Frost idea came around, it seemed like I think I might be able to get enough people. I know enough people where I can pull in not favors, but just ask. What's the harm in asking?
Some bands and things like that. Yeah, musicians.
And then like using every kind of connection I had, I slowly started putting feelers out there. And with the Evoken song, I got a hold. I think I might have got the email from Albert or something. Got a hold of John, and God, they got it. It's probably one of the best produced songs on the album. But them and Temple of Void and Municipal Waste and Child Bite and Phil Anselmo and Acid Witch. It's a pretty eclectic comp, which I still have a lot of copies. I bought all the LPs from the previous label.
Oh, got it.
So if you want a copy, let me know. I got probably 200 of them here. So
yeah, there you go. Yeah,
they came back and it's a fucking incredible song. They did Dawn of Megiddo. So.
Yep. What were you gonna say, Albert?
It's no bloody pussies, but it'll do.
But I thought it'd be cool to show another definitive influence. I'm just marching right past that. You're gonna trap me there. If not directly, then like I said, indirectly through kind of the Peaceful Three. But I think like a song like Dawn of Megiddo, the original. I went and listened to the original, and then obviously listened to this cover yesterday. Has some kind of funeral, death doom atmospherics to it, even. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the slower Frost songs, especially with that like monolithic kind of opening riff before it kind of picks up the pace, like a minute and a half in or so. It's got timpanis and French horns in it and stuff on the original, so it's got some of those elements that. Later on, Evoken, pulls in cello players and things like that add to that kind of atmosphere. Like you were talking about, Albert, the stuff that like Skepticism was kind of known for, some of those kind of atmospherics. So I think it's kind of a perfect choice for Evoken to pick this song, which I think is cool, Yeah,
because I think they came right back and has anybody done Dawn of Megiddo? I was like, no, sounds fucking fantastic, man.
What's really interesting that in poking around with this that I didn't realize, and I actually reviewed this for like Eclipse number 2. They were on the Call to Iron's Dwell Iron Maiden. They did Strange World. And I didn't know who the fuck Evoken was back then, so it was probably something that just went right over my head. Like I was excited that Opeth was on there and a few other bands and stuff. But I went and listened to that Strange World too, and it's pretty cool, actually. It's a weird cover. It's definitely Evoken, and it has this like it's the most like funeral-esque Iron Maiden song you're ever going to hear. But
I'm really curious. To see
it's unsettlingly cool. I thought it was kind of neat. So was that one that surprised you too, Albert, when that comp came out, where you're like, oh shit, I know these guys?
That was one of those things. I didn't hear that one until a few years after the Dwell. The Dwell comp that I think we all were more familiar with was the Celtic Frost one.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I think probably the reason maybe, you mentioned earlier, like why you had Quietus. I believe that in 2001, when that was released, that Dwell was actually distributing avant-garde
stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So that's probably why that one ended up as like kind of like the one record that was breaking through a little bit for them at the time. But
because Dwell was like ubiquitous at one point, like everything, like Dwell was like sending shit out everywhere. I just remember that, like there was just like
mid 90s was a good run for them.
Yeah.
But the Maiden cover, I mean, it's fucking cool. And I think that like that kind of speaks to the fact that this isn't just, you know, a funeral doom band or just only an extreme doom band with a limited palette, because where Evoken will eventually go, while it's still obviously doom and extreme doom, it's not. There's just a whole lot more going on.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think their cover with this Celtic Frost song, even though it's from a later era of Evoken from 2014, 2015, that kind of era, I mean, it still adds that, you know, what that suffocating atmosphere that you kind of come to expect from Evoken. It slows the song down a little bit. It's got an extra minute than the Celtic Frost version, you know, but it's cool to hear like John and newer guitar player who's not on the ones we're going to be talking about in the early years, but Chris Molinari just like tear into Tom G riffs. It's pretty fun. And Don Zaros, the newer keyboard player, it just adds this like cool atmosphere to everything. And it's pretty wild to hear such a fierce solo in Evoken, even though you hear more of them on like Hypnagogia and things like that. Yeah. But it's cool to see them like let loose on like a more traditionally like formatted song, you know? So
they're so restrained at times. It's just when you get a little bit of propulsion or like speed out of it, it's just like
such a release moment. Yeah, absolutely. So, and then from there, we're going to go into the aforementioned demo, the Shades of Night Descending, that Albert sort of talked a little bit about. And we're going to hear one kind of cut from the studio, and then we're going to hear another cut from something that Albert will help set up here in a second. But the song we're going to hear from the studio version is Into the Autumn Shade. You know, I'm sure you know how this works, Albert, where I kind of take notes on different songs and things like that. So feel free if you have things to add in particular about this track or something that stands out to you about the Shades record or some of the vibes you sort of get. But with Into the Autumn Shade, I think what you'll hear with this is definitely, you know, powerful, atmospheric, kind of haunting stuff. It sounds great for a demo. You know, I mean, it was recorded at Solid Sounds in New Jersey.
Just technically, it wasn't a demo.
Yeah, exactly. As you said, it doesn't really sound like a demo at all. You know, I mean,
it doesn't feel like a demo. And that's the thing too. Again, when you had that CD copy before it got picked up by Adiposier in what, 96? It was like 2 years later, I think, that it actually came out.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I feel like 90. I could be wrong. I could go into Metal Archives quickly and look, but that seems unnecessary.
That's for the listeners.
Well, they released some more demos in 96 and 97. I know that.
They did.
And then those are like on the version I have that has them collected too. So I don't know.
That came out just a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think those were more when they were just kind of shopping for deals. Whereas, you know, Shades of Night Descending always just kind of felt like a singular release to me. It's just so compact, but there's still so many shades to it. Pardon the pun. It's like there's some fast death metal riffs on there that you won't hear from that band for a long time afterwards. And there's stuff that's kind of rooted in the early 90s underground scene, and then there's those elements that where they just have a sense of melody that most bands, most extreme bands just did not possess. And if they did, they were taking it in a direction that was so far out of extreme metal that it really wasn't extreme metal anymore.
Sure.
So it was kind of hard. There just weren't a lot of bands hitting that sweet spot by that mid 90s period. By then, like, you know, My Dying Bride don't have any death metal vocals anymore.
Yeah.
You know, Anathema are transitioning into their
Pink Floyd
Coldplay
stage. Yep. Hey now.
Whatever, man. Sure, whatever, man.
At least Radiohead. Don't say Coldplay.
Sure.
Vincent loved Buckley. He was more in that mode, I think. So I'm always going to be an Anathema defender. You know me, Albert. I mean, I really brought you on here just to talk you into more Anathema Hall of Fames. Like, come on, what's happening here?
Hey, man, I've tried a couple, but they can't get it together.
They can't pull it together. Yeah.
No, that's a troubled band.
Tell me about it.
The whole thing, you know, taking it back to Evoken, like, goddamn, like that Yeah, I don't think it was a demo, and I think that anybody can kind of put it on today and
Sounds great. Yeah.
And see it as a band's first step, but just again, it's still so much more realized than what you heard from underground bands in the U.S. in the 90s.
Well, I think there's songs like the title track or even the Towers of Frozen Dusk, which we'll hear a live cut from, and I'll have you kind of talk a little bit more about that in a second, that definitely seem more directly rooted in like the disembowelment and the esoteric kind of influences. But what I like about Into the Autumn Shade is this seems like it's starting to develop its own Evoken personality. You can kind of hear it in Towers, especially like that last like 2 or 3 minutes. Whereas you're talking about like this melodic, kind of suffocating, symphonic, but still like brutally heavy and unsettling. It's that unique je ne sais quoi quality that Evoken has that is neither disembowelment or Peaceful 3. It's just Evoken, and you can kind of start to hear it formulate in a song like Into the Autumn Shade, you know?
I think what it is that separates them from a lot of those other bands, even those classic bands, like whether it's, you know, My Dying Bride or PL or Anathema, is they just have this penchant for crescendos that I don't think some of those other bands really had. Like, that's not to, you know, to say anything bad about the songwriting of like Craig McIntosh or something like that, because strike me down. Like, I certainly, you know, I would be smote if I were to even infer that, which I'm not. But it's just a different kind of style and approach. And I think Evoken had that feel. And again, you know, 25 years later, you can hear it coming through really clearly on that last LP.
Very clear.
But you can see how they get there if you listen to like you said, that final like 3-minute section of Towers of Frozen Dusk. I think that's really clear, and it were things like that which I think hooked us back then, and we're like, this isn't like other bands. This is something different.
So let's talk about that tune, and you kind of found or suggested playing the clip from the 100th issue show that these guys did, and that version of it, which is I think how they opened their set with this song, right?
I believe
they closed with this one.
Oh, is that what they closed with this one? Okay.
This is the closer, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's brutal beginnings before it kind of goes into, you know, hypnotic, kind of clean melodic, you know, guitars and things like that. There's even like that middle third of the song that's just like As the Flower Withers, Turn Loose the Swan riff. That's really, really awesome.
I mean, it reminds me of like, because we only had one Forever People.
Yeah.
It has that kind of like drive that I didn't really hear in Doom that much at all.
No.
Absolutely.
No. And that is, and again, it's like this idea of this death doom death style, where these bands that were playing like a slow, melodic, mournful version of death metal, or I mean, essentially these bands all came from death metal, and a few of them like were still retaining elements of it at that point in their development, and Evoken has hung on longer than most of those bands, and I think that they've managed to somehow keep it interesting too. But you can see where those roots are in something like that.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into it. We've got a lot of clips that we're going to be hearing from Vince and John throughout, even kind of separating a couple of the songs. And then when we come back, you'll after Towers of Frozen Dusk, you'll hear a couple more clips from John and Vince. They'll talk a little bit about that Decibel Fest and stuff, and we can kind of talk to Albert when we get back about that and what it meant to the band and things like that. So we're going to hear Dawn of Megiddo from the Morbid Tales, a tribute to Celtic Frost from 2014. Then 2 songs from Shades of Night Descending, one from the actual album, Into the Autumn Shade, and then from the live version from Decibel's 100th issue show, Towers of Frozen Dusk.
Actually, the band was started by Nick, Rob, who is a vocalist and bass player, and Phil, who played second guitar. You're right, I played on the early demos. I actually played on every single recording Evoken has ever ever done. I've been a drummer since day one. So, yeah, I mean, unless I was in a coma and I don't know about it, and by definition, being a drummer in a doom band and coma kind of go hand in hand. The name change, it was a necessity. It just didn't fit the music we were doing in writing. You had, it sounded immediately, you thought black metal. It was only changed, we settled on Asmodeus for that short time period because Rob at the time, he was listening to a lot of black metal, and he was starting to bring in some of those type riffs into the music. And somehow, I don't know how it happened, but we changed it to Asmodeus. First Phil left and Rob left. So that just left Nick and I. And the first thing we had to do was just change the name. So Nick called me up one night and he was just like, hey, what do you think about using Evoken from the Sargothon demo? Which, I mean, yes, they're a huge influence to us. But just the name itself, it rang a bell. It fit the music we were writing, the atmosphere we were trying to create. So it wasn't so much that, a lineup change were responsible for the name changes. I just remember being really, I don't even know if this is the proper verbiage to use. It was exciting. For me, I mean, at that point, I was so used to playing, because I played in thrash bands, I played in a hardcore band, I played in 2 death metal bands, but it was always one guy short, 2 guys short, so you only had me and a bass player, or me, guitar player, vocalist. It was never, a full, proper band. So here I was, sitting behind a drum kit and looking out and seeing 2 guitars and the bass and the vocals and how heavy everything sounded. It was just that alone was like the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah, we were influenced by many of those bands back in the day. I would say that the black metal, it came around 94 with Emperor, Satiricon, Dark Throne. That played a pivotal role because we put a lot of those riffs into our songs and we loved the atmosphere of those albums. And then we stuck to death metal also, and all the goth elements creeped in because we love having those moments in our songs. And we kept going, and eventually we heard the esoteric demo, and that caused us to have to tune lower because it was so heavy that we just had to keep up. Shades of Night Descending. Wow. I really do love that record. It was the first one I was on, and it led the way to what Evoken was always going to have in their songs. Like, if you listen to that record, there is everything that we have on every album. There's melodic singing, spoken word, death metal growls, low funeral doom growls, atmospheric passages. It's all there. So it never changed, I feel, from that first record to Hypnagogia. All those elements of Evoken are always going to be there. And it's just the way we write. So I'm very proud of that record. We're actually going to play a track off of that album that we haven't played since 1994 live on our current live shows coming up. So it's going to be exciting. I'm very, very excited about that. Albert from Decibel magazine is our savior. He single-handedly brought us to such a large audience that it really made a big difference. Every show after we did with Albert was so much better than before Albert. So playing the 100th anniversary was such a great honor. I got the assignment to pick up the singer from At the Gates, and that was really cool. I met him and his son, and I felt personally responsible to get him to the show, which was great. It was really cool. And we got it on a DVD. What could I say? We were very privileged for that. Thank you, Albert.
This one's called Towers of Frozen Dust.
The
Thank you. Have a good one. We got some show coming up. Thanks, man.
Oh, that was a great night. I had a lot of fun, and everybody was really cool. All the bands and the fans, and just there wasn't one negative aspect to it for us. So it's like it's a highlight. It's one of those things that if you sit back and write a list out of your top 5 to 10 things that are the most significant in a band's career for us, that show would be definitely in the top 5, maybe even the top 3. And Decibel and Albert, they've been fantastic. They've been helping us since day one, and we owe them a lot. We owe Albert a lot. A lot of things I don't think we would be doing if it wasn't for Albert. So yeah, that was one of those nights you sit back and you get a little bit of a smile on your face for that. Don't expect it much. I'm not gonna fucking smile. I'm in a doom band, for God's sake.
Is Evoken funeral doom? Death doom? Doom death? You can say whatever you want. I feel like we're more death doom. And but to explain what funeral doom is, I would think it's more from this perspective of the person who has died and they're going to hell, because it's never really pleasant. There's pleasant moments in Evoken's music, but for the most part it sounds like you're getting lowered down to hell, and this is the music that accompanies you on that travel, on that journey. And as far as the Evoken sound, I think that we like to switch gears a lot, so that makes us not exactly funeral doom, because we don't play the same riff for 15 minutes straight at one tempo. That would just bore the hell out of me. I like keeping it mixed up, but also had those elements.
So that was Towers of Frozen Dusk, the live version, Into the Autumn Shade, and Dawn of Megiddo, the Celtic Frost cover. So, Albert, we heard from John and Vince in some of those audio clips right there, and they were very complimentary about the role that not only that concert and what a great honor it was to be sort of part of it, but what Decibel has sort of meant and things like that. I mean, talk a little bit about that 100th issue show and how you decided, who to invite or who to ask to sort of be part of that, and why, bringing a band like Evoken meant so much both to you and maybe to them.
Yeah, I mean, Evoken around that time, um, I guess we could go pretty far back here. Like, I mean, they were playing a little bit, but they weren't playing particularly regularly. I had booked them the year previous for the first year of the Decibel tour. We did a bunch of regional openers on that.
Oh yeah,
In
I
addition to
remember.
the 4 bands that were like on the road consistently throughout the tour. And Evoken was the band that I insisted on putting on multiple dates. So we booked them for, they played Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New York, which were also coincidentally the 3 shows on the tour that I attended. So, and that was, to me, that was really cool because I knew that those guys weren't used to playing like, 1,000 cap rooms in the States. Like, they got to play Irving Plaza, which was sold out that night. And, for me, just being in a position where I could give a band like Evoken, who I love, an opportunity that they wouldn't maybe normally get from somebody, it's fortunate to use your powers for good every once in a while, when you have that opportunity. So that was just, honestly, it was just that. It was just me being a fan of the band and knowing that when we were putting together the 100th issue, I wanted to do something fun with bands I like that I felt was a representation of the things that were important to the core of the magazine. And that was a really varied show.
Great bill.
Yeah, you were there. You remember it was just like, it was Evoken, Tombs, Municipal Waste, Repulsion, Pig Destroyer, and Converge. And
you had Tampa doing a DJ set.
We had Tampa doing a DJ set. We had him come out and do a cover of SOD's United Forces with Municipal Waste. We had John Baisley come out and play Coral Blue with Converge. We had a lot of weird, cool stuff, and
well, John even mentions how he was really honored because I think you tasked him with the role of picking up Tampa from the airport.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and he mentions that in the sound clip that we heard. Yeah, just how like it was really cool for him to hang out with Tampa and yeah, things like that. So yeah,
there's if you want to get to them later, there's other stories of Evoken having to
other airport guests they picked up.
Not other airport guests, but them providing the Evoken shuttle from one venue to another in New York for our 10th anniversary shows that we did.
Oh no shit.
So yeah,
go ahead. What's that one?
Well, okay, that one. All right, I should probably preface this with saying that I've seen Evoken. I've only seen them twice when I haven't actually booked Evoken. I saw them once in 1996 in New Jersey at some like shitty dive bar. When they just we knew they were playing, so we drove out to Jersey. We saw them, and then one year they played MDF. Maybe it was 2013, and I obviously didn't book that. So those are like the 2 times that I've seen Evoken that I didn't book him. But 3. They've played 3 shows of the Decibel tour, the 100th issue show, the 10th anniversary show. We had 2 10th anniversary shows in New York, one at the Best Buy Theater, which is gone, and the other at St. Vitus. There's some Decibel Metal and Beer Fest Philadelphia in 2019, and
I saw him there. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Metal and Beer Fest Los Angeles. 2018 Metal and Beer Fest Philly, 2019 Metal Beer Fest LA. So that's 7 times that I've got to see Evoken when I've booked them. But the story about the shuttle in New York, okay, so this is like, again, you're always trying to use your powers for good, make cool shit happen.
Yeah.
For our 10th anniversary, I managed to put together Well, the longer story is a friend of mine books Amon Amarth. They were playing the Best Buy Theater in Times Square in New York City, and they were on tour with Sabaton and Skeleton Witch.
Okay.
So I was like, I want to do something cool for the 10th anniversary of Decibel, but I want to like take an existing show and kind of build off of it and turn it into something. And he's like, well, what about this Amon Amarth play? Maybe we can, maybe you can build something out of that. And I was like, what if we, what if we took Skeleton Witch off that bill and moved them to St. Vitus, and then I built a show there, and then I took another band and like put them on the bill of the Times Square show. And he's like, well, that seems kind of stupid, but if you want to do that, that's fine. I was like, okay, let's do that. So the band that I got for the Times Square venue was the first U.S. show of Valenfire.
Oh, awesome.
When they were active. So we
I
flew
was very
in.
jealous of that. Yeah.
We flew in Valenfire, and they were excited because it was like, hey, your first U.S. show is going to be a sold out, 2,500 cap room or whatever it was in Times Square. And they're like, yeah, okay, sure. So, so I was able to do that, and then with the show that we built out for St. Vitus, it was Skeleton Witch headlining with support from Black Anvil and Evoken. So after like I thought of that, I was just like, okay, well, Greg Mack is going to be in town with Valenfire, and he's a pal. Mm-hmm. And just a year ago, Evoken recorded a Paradise Lost cover that you may hear later on in this show.
Yeah.
Of Rotting Misery. And I just was like, man, he's going to be in town. They're going to be playing. Let me ask him if he would consider like performing Rotting Misery with them. If like in my head, there's like all this shit that's got to line up. It's like, okay, yeah. First I got to convince Evoken to play this song. I thought, okay, that won't be that hard. I'm sure they'll be into it. And then I got to be like, okay, you want to play this with Greg McIntosh? You're not going to be like no. Totally intimidated by that. And like it took them a second to kind of get their heads around that, which I completely understand, but they got on board with it. So then I sent like the cover to Greg, and I was like, check this out. These guys fucking rule. They're going to play that night. Would you play this with them? And he listened to it, and he's like, oh, this is actually great. Yeah, I totally do this. He's like, problem though, he's like, the whole reason we were able to get Valenfire over was because they were coming over on tourist visas, which is not an artist visa. So you're just coming, you're trying not to set off any, any flags, any alarms. This was back in my less professional days before we started doing festivals. Sure. I would never do this now. And I'm not even joking. I would never attempt anything like this now. But back then,
DIY
in my youth, Greg was like, if I bring my guitar, like we're going to get pulled out of line, and I know something's going to happen. They're going to look at us and be like, you guys, you're a bunch of scummy metal guys, and you're going to play a show, and you have a tourist visa. This is bullshit. He's like, I don't want us to get sent back. I don't want to blow the Valenfire show for this. He's like, so can you find me a guitar? And I was like, yeah. Of course.
A left-handed upside down, yeah.
A left-handed 7-string guitar.
Oh, yeah.
Which became an interesting quest.
Where's Korn when you need them?
Right? And eventually, we found one, and they, I can't even remember who it was. Maybe it was Charvel. That sound right? I can't even remember who it was. This guitar is still at the Decibel office, by the way.
Is it signed by Greg?
It's signed by Greg. It's signed by like all of Evoken. And, like,
sweet. Nice.
It's there. I guess I got to find it at some point. But like, we found it, and we found him a guitar, and he was totally down. And then we had the day that both these shows were on the same day. It was like the fucking St. Vitus show was supposed to start right as the right as Amon and Marth were ending or halfway through their set or something in Manhattan. So after, what happened was Evoken came up early to the theater so they could just rehearse with Greg, like in the green room, like go through the song a couple times so Greg could get a feel for the pace. And then, so they hung out and they like watched Valenfire and they saw some stuff. And then, after Valenfire was done, Evoken still had their van. So Evoken drove, Greg and Hamish from Valenfire, Ex Mighty Broad and Godtrim now, loved Evoken. So he wanted to see, he didn't really give a shit that much that Greg was going to play a song with him. He just wanted to see Evoken play any song. Yeah. So it was like, half of Evoken. It was definitely John and Vinny and I think Dave and Scott Korber and me and Greg and Hamish. And we drove like right after Valenfire was done all the way over to Vitus. They, Evoken ran as fast as they could, got themselves set up, started, getting ready to play. And then about, 20 minutes into their set, Greg got up and totally crushed Rotting Misery with them. And there's a video of it.
I was going to say, is there video of that?
Video of that on the YouTubes, yeah.
Oh, shit.
Our old intern, she recorded it, in fact. She was there. So, anyway, that's a long-ass story that's going to be a fucking 5-part episode.
I think I might have heard part of that at some point, but it's always good to have that come back, yeah.
Our fans love Paradise Lost. Don't worry, because we talk about them enough. So anything with Greg,
I drop probably every episode. I'll drop something.
Yeah, we work Paradise Lost into somehow. So
if I could do just a series just talking about them, I would.
Exactly. Yeah, book on tapes from Mark. Yeah. So I guess if let's kind of get back to the narrative of sort of the band now that we've sort of worked through the demo phase. Basically, after Shades. Is they released a couple demos in 96 and 97, and then they dropped Towers of Frozen Dusk on the Metal Explosion Volume 4, which was on Oedipusir Records in 97. So that was why I think at one point people thought they were a French band. And then that's what gets them signed to Elegy Records, which is where we get to Embrace the Emptiness, their debut in 98. And the debut for me, and again, I have for me, the bar is way high in terms of like how much I really dig this band. But, this is probably the record from them that I listen to the least. I probably listen to Shades a little bit more than I do Embrace. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because my first record from them was Quietus. So it's like weird to go one step back. I'm not really sure, but it's brutally heavy. It's hallucinatory. It does usher in kind of a more modern, kind of cleaner sound for this type of music. I mean, like I said, the only reason I think it's my least listened to is just because Quietus, I didn't pick this up until the last couple of years or whatever. But what are your feelings on the debut? Were you kind of like relieved when it first came out because you're like, oh man, I've been waiting for this for 4 or 5 years? Or
no, I honestly, this was a record that I probably heard it 6 months after it came out. It was not a record that I was even aware of. Let's just put it that way, because it was on Elegy and it was so fucking under the radar at that point. And then I remember getting it, and it felt honestly like a little bit of a disappointment to me. Because it's still to this day, it's the record that I also listen to the least from the band.
So I don't feel so bad then. Good. That makes me feel. Thank you, Albert, for that. I was pretty self-conscious about that comment before.
Yeah, don't feel bad about it. And I think it's the one that resonates the least because it is the one that, I don't know. I think it kind of it lacks some of the depth and dynamics that were on. Shades, they didn't really come through as clearly, and I think that was maybe a little off-putting at the time, and it felt like to me that almost feels like their most funereal record, because it is just so like there's just like the color palette is just limited, And it's like you said, it's dark and heavy and brooding, and by any other band making that record, that's going to be like a great doom metal album. But since the bar for Evoken,
the bar is pretty high. Yeah,
it's pretty high. That I think that's the record that I return to the least. I don't dislike it. I'm happy to own it. If in the unlikely event it came on at a bar that I was at, I'd be very happy. But I see that as kind of the one that's the weakest link in their discography.
Sure. But even saying that, what we both said, like the song itself, "Tragedy Eternal," is a pretty strong highlight from that record for me. I'm not sure for you if you have kind of favorites from that record, but this one always stood out the most to me for some reason. It's
the Rick from My Dying Bride drum beats.
Well, exactly
On point.
It's got a lot of that.
I love that
yes.
shit.
Yes, the sort of double bass kicks and some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's in there.
Yeah, and I mean, I just wrote like it's primordial. It's kind of beautiful. It's almost like listening to this is a pretty pretentious comment, but this goes back to something I think Mark and I used to watch in college with some friends of ours. But like watching like Koyaanisqatsi footage, like time lapse of like decaying nature or something. That's like when I hear a record like
stuff,
this,
yes.
College shit, But it's like you kind of hear that in the beginning phases of the song, because the song does unfold in a more funeral type way, than maybe some of their later stuff. So it does have that. Dario Derna is doing keys on this record, and they're pretty monochromatic, and they kind of float through the song, kind of like a fog too. It's kind of interesting approach. It's far less dynamic than the keys that you hear on the newer stuff, but it is an interesting kind of more funeral way of sort of doing stuff. But Nick's got some great leads on this. I believe, does Nick do most of the leads, or does John? I was trying to like do research and I couldn't really get a clear answer on that.
I mean,
do you know? Or is it just kind of they go back and forth a little bit?
I don't know, because I
Okay.
said, the only time I saw them with Nick was 1996, because they went through a period, I would say probably like 1998 to, I don't know, 2010. They probably played like 15 shows.
Yeah, they barely played. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I couldn't.
So it's hard to say. Okay. Well, we'll just say Nick for the sake of, whatever. Just because John's the vocalist. So I just figured whoever's the guitarist vocalist usually is doing mostly rhythm, But, But yeah, the leads in the solo at like the 5-minute mark or whatever does remind me a lot of like Paradise Lost and really the early kind of Danny Vinny Anathema sort of style. Very cool. And I did find this really cool quote from Erebus magazine about this song in particular, and I thought it was pretentious but also like appropriate. And they said it sounds like unfolding staggeringly slow. Tragedy Eternal can be compared to an ancient temple where lightness streams running far underground send up vibrations and musical tones through the earth. Whatever the fuck that means, that's kind of what this song reminds me of, Albert.
Pretentious, but it makes a couple people buy a CD.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm definitely hearing some early Pyogenesis in the leads and stuff too that really kind of like over modulated guitar tone.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Leave it to Mark to always come up with Pyogenesis. He's
or PL.
yeah,
I don't know if Asmodeus was like taken from, because that was like Tim Ellerman's pseudonym in Pyogenesis. I don't know if they took that from Pyogenesis, or if they took that from mythology or whatever. But for the previous band name for Asmodeus, I have no idea. But if I can draw connections with Pyogenesis, I will.
I like that.
As long as those connections are only to Ignatius Creation.
Oh no!
Hey, man,
I'll go all
we're
the way
Twin
to-
L blood
Twin L
guys.
Oh,
blood,
I know how far you guys go. Trust me.
Hey,
some of us
Wagner
are
agrees with
after
us. I got confirmation from Jeff Wagner on Radical Research that we were okay to go as far as Twin L blood. So
They were not the first podcast to do an entire
no,
episode
that's true.
on Twin
That's
L
true. He even owed it.
they were the second one to do it.
Yeah,
I know.
Who knew there would be two
And that was
Pyogenesis podcasts out there in the landscape? It's a
I got
weird
it.
world.
I got to say, I do love the track "Twin Ale Blood." I do love that song. I think that's like, so I will go that far. But man,
It's a batshit crazy record.
It's bonkers, but it was like I was working at Relapse when it came out, and me and Jeff, I think might have been the only two people that gave a shit about it. Everybody else was like, "Oh, this is awful! Like, what are you doing? Like, they lost it!" Like, and they thought that with the last, the previous record as well. But they're like, I don't know.
Hey man, I'm a guy that defends Skid Row, Subhuman Race, so I can't really talk. I've got my
personal.
crosses
It's all personal
to bear,
opinion. Who cares?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. What's your album that you're constantly defending? There's got to be a couple
that nobody else cares about.
That like nobody cares about, because I know we all have them.
I mean, Jesus, it's got to be more than a couple.
Yeah,
I'm sure I like all kinds of things that are like objectively terrible. I don't know. How about Def Leppard Hysteria? How about that?
Okay.
That's a great record.
I can still defend that record too. For me,
I mean, yeah, like half of it is easily defensible.
Yeah,
and then the other half is a little more difficult. But
sure.
like, no, I mean, I think it's a great record. It's a great
Woman. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Because I love it. I don't
have any thumbs down.
Okay.
I don't have any thumbs down on.
Okay. Just making sure. I didn't know. I have very strong feelings about that song.
That Love and Affection song at the end is pretty bad.
Yeah, that's pretty.
That is
awful.
a weak ass closer of a rock album.
Yeah. No, that was the first cassette tape I ever broke from overplaying. So I only broke 2 tapes, that and Appetite for Destruction. Those are the 2 tapes I played too much and had to replace. So,
Wear out.
But I was. How old are you? Are you Mark's age?
46.
Okay. So I just turned 43 2 days ago. So, thank you. But so like I was 9, when that record, and really 10 when that record really started to hit big in 88. So I don't know. You break shit when you're 10 because you're a moron. So I also did trade my I own 3 copies of Hysteria. True story. You'll appreciate this as a baseball guy. The first one I broke, then I bought a replacement copy, and an older neighborhood kid wanted Def Leppard Hysteria and traded me his Roger Clemens rookie for Def Leppard Hysteria. So
It's pretty good.
Whoa.
Yeah,
I think you won that trade.
I think I did. At the time, my aunt scolded him. Oh yeah, I got that Roger Clemens.
Is that 83 tops?
It was. Tops? I think it's a 85 tops.
85 tops.
85 tops. Yep. I was just actually going through a bunch of old cards. We dug them out of the basement, and I have a Jerry Rice rookie that it's kind of beat up a little bit, but we priced it out on eBay, and there were like 3 or 4 of them going for like $19,000, and I was like, holy shit. So if I could get like $500 for a Jerry Rice rookie that's sitting in my basement that I don't even know I had, like,
see how
I'd
many
be happy.
sold first.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, you got to understand now, and this is something that I've learned only from talking to Matt Calvert, who runs Dark Descent Records, who's a huge baseball nerd and collector. There's so many levels of grading with this stuff now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And you could have like this killer card that looks to you like it's in good condition,
but it's slightly
and
like
some shitheads can look at it and go,
like
"Oh, that's worth $50." Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm getting my hopes up only to be crushed, which is
I mean, that's kind of what life is about, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a metaphor for what Evoken's singing about.
How you come back from the crushing is what.
Yeah, exactly.
If it turns out that it's devalued, then maybe I've got a Def Leppard tape I can interest you in.
In a Roger Clemens rookie, it's a deal. It's a deal. So, especially when that guy finally makes the Hall of Fame, which probably will never happen. But, so now we work towards kind of what a lot of people see as the first major bar for the band, or the first major pinnacle, which is the Quietus record in 01. And Decibel Zone Scott Korber ranked it in his top 5 Death Doom records all the way back in issue 18. And he called it a blend of haunting, regal, monolithic heaviness, and innovative production. And they get signed to Avant-Garde, which is obviously a better label than Elegy.
I've heard of them at least.
Yeah. Because I think they were big fans of Roberto's Monumentum, the In Absentia Christi record. I think I've read that's kind of what was alluring to him. Like, oh, this guy's in a cool band that does some atmospheric sort of things.
I mean, that and the fact that the dude put out the fucking Thorgothon album, I think probably
that's probably a pretty big one as well. Yes, I think that was probably more appealing. But I was just trying to get a Monumentum reference in the podcast. And then Korber also went on to write about it in the Top 100 of the Decade issue that you guys put out. And he said it's crushing slabs blend with masterful songwriting, cavernous death growls, and a regal dark ambience, all set to funeral tempos. And that one came out at number 46, right in between Witch Cult from Electric Wizard and
Witch Cult Today,
and Between the Buried and Me, Alaska. So yeah,
interesting. No, we should talk about John's vocals, because I don't know of another, like one of my all-time favorite death metal growls is Aaron Stainthorpe, because nobody has managed to figure out how to do that. But John has figured out how to do a similar. They're in kind of the same milieu of vocals, and it's especially during those dark times when Aaron stopped doing death vocals. Like John almost like picked up the candle from him. I just I don't know your guys' thoughts on his voice, but I absolutely love his death growl. Yeah, no, go ahead, Albert. I'm sure you have some pretty formative thoughts on kind of John's style and kind of what he's doing.
Don't be so sure, but I would say I think that, like Aaron, he's really good at enunciating and having it isn't just, he's not just using his voice as as another instrument, as often happens with somebody who's doing death vocals. I think that there's emoting that's actually coming through the death vocals that you would get with Aaron also. And I think that's like, when that's happening, that's why it stands out a bit more. You can feel it. There's a power, there's a melancholy. It's not just moving the song along. So yeah, he is really good, and he can get, and I mean, I hate to yet again go back to the Shades release, but there's a lot of range on that. And I think I think that that was probably more of them being young and just trying a bunch of different things at the time. And he still has that range, but I think it's like you see it's kind of weighted out a bit differently over the course of a record now. So maybe you don't notice it quite as much just because the records are longer. And not everything is like packed into an EP length thing. But I think he has a real interesting range that, most of these guys don't really have.
And when he wants to, and I think Mark kind of referenced this with Aaron, the sort of visceral power that he can sort of create in singular moments.
Yeah, kind of like he almost like pulls back to that, I Am the Bloody Earth, where there's a lot of like really deep, like kind of explosive stuff, but for emotional impact, not for like, hey, look what I can do kind of thing. It was like all like pushing the song forward.
I think on the newer stuff too, and we'll get to later in the episode, but like he's added some more layers to, some whispering and some more kind of spoken word. And I don't know if I'd call him clean per se, but there's definitely cleaner.
There's like this talky kind of stuff.
Parts, Which Aaron does too, kind of like he almost narrates during certain
Aaron's
parts
not
of those early records.
I don't know if I've never heard John like sing like church choir or anything, but Aaron can't really sing either. But he uses his limitations to this amazing effect, and I just like Angel and Dark River stuff is still like I hadn't listened to that in probably 5 or 6 years. Went back maybe last year and listened to it like 4 or 5 times.
Probably when that Hall of Fame came out.
Maybe. And it was just like, hairs on their arm stuck up again. I was like, oh, this is still doing it 25 years later.
Yeah. I mean, there's some riffs I'm going to talk about later in the episode that come directly off of Angel in the Dark, that Evoken kind of pull through. But
I don't think anybody's ever been able to kind of like volley, like, what My Dang Bride came up with originally. And then Evoken kind of comes up and like, knocks it over the net. It's weird that nobody's ever, maybe it's a difficult, I play drums for fun. I'm not a musician. I don't know where these things come from, but it's interesting to see that because it doesn't happen very often.
Why do you think, Albert, a record like Quietus didn't hit bigger with the My Dying Bride crowd and European audiences, being that it was on avant-garde and things like that? Like, do you think that record had any impact, or do you think it's like kind of a just now seen as like a underrated masterpiece that it is. I guess I wasn't really aware of what it was doing in 2001, and maybe you were a little bit more. I have no idea.
I don't think it was doing anything, honestly. It's and it's through no fault of the bands, other than the fact that they, weren't touring Europe in 2001, or they weren't touring America, they weren't playing shows. I think it was still like you had to kind of get out there and be out there, and it's also a weird time for that style. Like the if you think of the progenitors of that scene, like 2001 is like Believe in Nothing, Paradise Lost. They're a fucking mess. Anathema.
I mean, Anathema's doing like the Radiohead, Jeff Buckley stuff.
Nobody sounds like what they did. It's all.
I mean, Bride was kind of coming back. Yeah,
they were coming back with that. With what is that?
Well, there was Light, and then the record right after that, Dreadful Hours.
Was
the
terrible
Death
Photoshop
vocals
cover
and stuff
series.
came. Yeah.
I'm by the way, Mark, I'm glad that you still defend Believe in Nothing. That
was the first writing gig I ever got for Decibel, to do like 150 words, and it took me 2 days. Yeah.
And
it still got tweaked.
I think that it is. I think that's part of it, though. That like they're just the tenets of that scene were gone. They were an American band, which I think was slightly exotic to some people over there. But I think that just the extreme doom scene or the death doom scene in 2001, just globally, was pretty small. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there was like this great audience that they were missing out on. Like, I just don't think there was an audience for this stuff for years and years. I mean, if you just think of what, the metal scene was in 2001, at least on the commercial side, yikes. As somebody who just recently watched the Woodstock 99 documentary.
I mean, it's on HBO.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
have my rock history kids read an article on Woodstock 99, and they're just like, they stare at me. They're like, what the fuck? I'm like, yeah.
It's harrowing.
It's the Altamont of the 90s,
Yeah.
So
it's not as much fun as the Firefest documentary.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But if you like disaster
those people got what they deserved, yeah.
If you like disaster porn music documentaries, and I do.
Yes. Yeah.
But anyway, the idea of like why that record didn't catch on, I just don't think there was the audience for that stuff was at its smallest. Let's be honest. In America, it was literally Metal Maniacs. Nothing else would write about that. And then Europe, I mean, it's a bigger scene, but it's still like, if you were an American band, and I just don't see how you were making an impact over there if you weren't there. And
especially if you weren't touring. Yeah.
Yeah. And Evoken was just nowhere near getting there. Yeah. So I think it's a great album. I think it's like you said, it's definitely like the first benchmark in their career as far as a full length goes. The word that always comes to mind for me, and I remember reading Scott's quotes, regal. For me, it's majestic. Mm-hmm. I always just think of when I hear that record, and that although the next couple records that follow it are stylistically different, I think that makes a Quietus stand out a little bit more. But it has some interesting. There are some other interesting Doom connections, I believe. Didn't Stephen O'Malley do the cover of?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So
O'Malley did the cover. Yeah.
And that's like again 2001, the Doom scene.
I think he did the Cathedral End Time cover the same year, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He did. Yeah. So it's it's just this weird kind of transitional time. I mean, there were certain things happening, like 2001, the Electric Wizard were touring the U.S. for the first time on Dope Throne.
Yeah, we saw the Warhorse Electric Wizard. Yeah,
man.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see Warhorse again. I haven't seen him since I almost died in the basement of some fucking fallout shelter in Allentown, Pennsylvania, whatever the hell that was that they
I passed out drunk from Relapse giving me too many free shots.
Yeah.
And the guitar player was on his laptop. He's like, "Hey man, you all right?"
Yeah, they were hanging out in the empty stadium in Milwaukee Metal Fest or something. Or was that Jersey? That was Jersey Fest. Yeah. So,
but again, there's a lack of a scene for that, because even what Wizard were playing then was different. It was a different appeal.
Yeah.
It was kind of there was this, even though obviously Dope Throne is super heavy. It's
got a stoner thing going.
Yeah, it's appealing to a different listener.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's still no scene for this stuff, I think.
There's something kind of intellectual too about a band like this as well. Like you have to put a little bit of effort into it.
Yeah, it's not like a casual experience.
Yeah.
No.
And I think
you got to go all in.
Yeah. Mark, do you know who produced this record? I'm sure Albert knows the weird. No, you're not as far off as you might think.
No, George Lynch,
ex Guns N' Roses guitarist Bumblefoot.
Really?
Yeah.
No
it's
shit.
It's like a weird
random.
Who knows? Yeah. So he must have had a studio and
Jersey guy.
I don't know much about that connection. Do you, Albert? Is it just a random kind of factoid? So there you go.
I don't either.
But the first song we're going to play from this in this next set, we're going to hear the Tragedy Eternal from Embrace the Emptiness that we just kind of talked about. But the first song, we'll play two songs, but one in this set, and then when we come back, we'll play the kind of quintessential early kind of tune from them, I think, in Pestilence Burning. Yep. But first, Tending to the Dire Hatred, and I think the lyrics in this song kind of sum up the whole genre in a lot of ways. He says, John sings, "Hatred is poured all over me, and now I must reciprocate this emotion, for life is to suffer and death belongs to you." I mean, that's fucking death doom, funeral doom in a nutshell, right? So I love how this song, and really the album in particular, and Albert, I think you mentioned it, has this openness to it, as opposed to a lot of the suffocating oppression that you'll get with especially Antithesis and a little bit of Caress of Void. So you can actually hear what Steve and Vince are doing kind of rhythmically in this song, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's dark, but not overtly bleak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, you can there's weighty guitars, obviously, but again, there's this openness, what Dario's doing with the layered keys and stuff like that. It's cool. I mean, the whole song and the whole record is really a level up from what we heard, or what you'll hear in a second from Embrace the Emptiness. But I dig, cool lead riffs around the 5:30 mark. This is what really reminds me of Your River from My Dying Bride.
Most of my comments are Bride. I don't want to keep throwing that out.
Yeah, no, but
a lot of the
I actually found I think it's from Your River, a specific song or whatever.
but the drum, not a lot of people picked up Rick's drumming style. Everybody that's played with Bride since has done his tom roll thing that he always did. And I always love, because that was something that I figured out how to do early and just latched onto the same, everybody, well, I guess there's only been one, but Dan tries to emulate parts of what Ken was doing with Carcass. There's certain, a lot of those early drummers really had an identity that I don't think a lot of drummers do now, because they can play anything and it's just ridiculous. And there's not those limitations where they're trying to figure out what they can play within.
Yeah.
And I love what Vince isn't always. I'm positive they don't play to a click track, because there's this undulation in his playing, and in general, it's not this rigid meter that it sticks to, and I love that.
It's a looseness and openness.
Yeah.
There's an organic.
It sounds like a
feel.
band playing live together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this is, we were just talking about John's vocals. You hear him doing some of the kind of spoken word stuff a little in a song like this. So what are your thoughts on this tune or Tragedy Eternal, Albert? Do you have any kind of specific things that we didn't mention, or that you kind of have an appeal to, or?
No, I think it is. And you mentioned that it's the track that kind of stands out for you on this record. And it is for me as well. Because I think that it does kind of encompass a lot of those elements that you'll hear them develop even further on the next record, and obviously beyond that. Mm-hmm. But this is their first kind of step you could see them taking a step forward here, and it isn't tied to their past, and it is only partially kind of representative of their future. So it's kind of this interesting, I don't want to say middle ground, but it's just like it's essentially a transitional period for them. So yeah, I think that this is the best representative track of that.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get into it, and then we'll hear from John and Vince. John's going to talk about Embrace and Quietus, and Vince is going to talk, I think, a little bit about this era as well. So we've got a couple clips from them, and then Tragedy Eternal from the Embrace the Emptiness record, their debut, and then from Quietus, the aforementioned Tending the Dire Hatred.
The mid-90s were not kind to Evoken. We stuck to our guns and we played this style of music from the beginning, and there wasn't really too much of a market for it, but we were able to play with a wide variety of bands, which is good for us. We could play with death metal bands, we could play with stoner bands, we could play with doom bands. We can mix it all up, and we would not feel like we were outsiders, because we had like moments of all those genres in our music. But as far as Embrace the Emptiness, I remember vividly playing a track for Rob from Elegy, who signed us for that album, and he said the hairs on his arms stood up because he was blown away by one of our songs, and that was a great moment for me and for the band. We were very proud of that, and we got signed for Embrace the Emptiness right on the spot. It took a while, but we carried on, and here I am doing an interview for Decibel magazine. Awesome.
I remember, just for me, the ups and downs that happened throughout the whole time period. More ups than downs. Dario joining the band it took everything another level. At that point, we were writing music, but we didn't have the luxury of having keyboards, of adding that element of atmosphere. And then Dario and how talented he is, and we were all on the same page, so it was easy to work with. And at the time we were actually rehearsing in this monthly room in Staten Island. So we were able to go in there for hours and just, try coming up with different things, and a little bit of absinthe here and there. It took a long time, not because of lack of label interest. It was more so longer songs take longer to write. And then to have Elegy offer to put the album out was great. I mean, we've known Rob for years, and he was nearby, so it was a lot easier than having to, coordinate things from here to overseas. Even though at that point in time our fan base was basically Europe, so it allowed us to say, try and start building something here. It was really fucking cool at the time. I have a lot of fond memories.
Yes, Quietus was a breakthrough record for Evoken. It really was keyboard heavy oriented. Of course, Dario really made a lot of the songs really thick with keyboards, and I added to the atmosphere of that record. And I think that I can't really say what was going through our minds at the moment, but that's what this came out. That's how we wrote songs back then. And I am so proud of that record too. I'm proud of everything we've done. That this has a certain, the reverb that was used on that record gives it such a ghostly sound, an old sound. And I think where Ghost Fall Silent stands out for me the most. And we're very proud of that album. And it's so heavy. I can't say anything else about that record. It's like perfection to me.
That was In Solitary Rune, and I'm sorry, that was Tending the Dire Hatred and Tragedy Eternal. Spoiler alert.
Oh,
In Solitary Rune's coming soon here.
the show notes are, people can see the show notes immediately.
Yeah.
FYI.
So, we heard John talk a little bit about Embrace and Quietus there, but another kind of decibel source that I thought was kind of interesting from the aforementioned Daniel Lake, who did the U.S. black metal book, in the Doom Metal Top 100 Albums of All Time, which Mark, of course, did the cover for. Evoken came in at number 35, Quietus did, and I thought I'd read what Daniel had to say about the record as we kind of, talk a little bit more about Quietus and move towards Antithesis of Light. And he said, there are other worlds of doom than these, I guess. For the sake of collegiality, we'll allow other branches of the style to be accepted into the doom family. But let's get one thing straight. Evoken play the Webster's Dictionary definition of doom. Their song's utterly airless density makes the word apotheosis ashamed of its own inadequacy. The gravity of their music frowns so intensely that jaw muscles peel loose from faces and burrow toward the center of the earth. The New Jersey band's second proper album robes intangibles like grief and anguish in hesitant flesh, blood and bone. Here be doom. To the Evokalite, that's Evoken Acolyte, you unwashed mouth breather, Opener and Pestilence Burning, which is the next song we're going to hear from them, is immediately recognizable by the tinny, far-off crackle of the Victrola, sounding out its plaintive piano melody. From there, the mountains, the sky, and the whole fucking asteroid belt come crashing down, disguised as overamped instrumentation and John Paradiso's quarry-scraping bellow. Nuclear detonation chords are underscored by restlessly scrawled guitar noise and wrapped in more crawling keyboard laments. Whether you choose to embrace the emptiness or caress the void, I see what Daniel did there, we should all agree on the unquestionable quality of Quietus. So I thought that was well put, well written there from Daniel. So
he's a treasure.
You should give that guy a job, Albert.
Yeah, man, why don't you hire that guy?
Give him a book. I think he'd do a good job.
By the way, John's top 5, because they've got these little sidebars, his top 5 doom is Winter, Disembowelment, Dead Can Dance, The Serpent's Egg, Paradise Lost Gothic.
That's a good one.
And Sadness, Ames de Marbe. I don't know if I know that Sadness record.
I don't either.
Oh, you guys, wait, you don't know that record?
No. I put it on the list. Shit.
That record, Chris and I are both nerdy about that record. That's like, I think that was on Witch Hunt, 94. It is like, it's fucked up in a Into the Pandemonium way, but
you had me into the pandemonium.
Yeah, but still in an extreme metal way. Yeah, that's got to get.
Okay.
That's your homework. Yeah.
All right. I just recently picked up for this Doom series. I'd always heard of them, but I never actually owned it. That Revelation on Rise Above from Maryland.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because I'm trying to remember who's talked about it that we interviewed. I think it was Mike Smale talked about them. There were a bunch of guys we interviewed that kept referencing. I was like, fucking A, why does everybody keep referencing this? I got to get this Revelation. So,
Are they from Switzerland? Sadness?
Oh, they're Swiss?
Yeah, they are Swiss. And by the second record, I believe Martin Ian actually produces it.
Oh, shit.
So, like, they get the Celtic Frost vibes are pretty undeniable.
Mark, we should have known about this a long time ago. So, hey, you know what? That's great about doing a podcast is discovering these hidden gems that we should have known about a long fucking time ago.
Martin did vocals as well on that second record.
Huh. Interesting.
Or backing vocals.
So back to Quietus as we kind of wrap up this record. The last song we're going to play is I think by a lot of fans kind of seen as kind of one of the quintessential Evoken songs, which is the aforementioned "In Pestilence Burning." What do you think about this tune? It seems like kind of a not just a quintessential song, but it's an album opener to like a big record for them. It just seems like all the elements kind of working together. It's like if someone wanted an early Evoken song, I might just like listen to this. This is like the essential tune.
I mean, it's a coming out party for them, that's for sure. Like that's the moment where they are clearly taking that next step forward. It is 3 years in between that and Embrace the Emptiness, and the growth in the band over that period is just like really clear, that they're they're kind of reaching into a new level. And as far as like trying to kind of describe what it is, it's just that word that I always think of when I think of this record is just majestic. Mm-hmm. And it is like, it's such a colorful arrangement with the violin. And I know when you say doom metal and death doom and violin, everybody thinks My Dying Bride immediately, but it's got like fuck all to do with My Dying Bride. It's like that song doesn't sound anything like My Dying Bride. And
I hear more like Lycia and some of those kind of like bands, almost a little bit.
There's a gothier
Dead Can Dance,
vibe.
Some of that stuff.
The more Dead Can Dance vibe than
yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's heavy, but there's something about it that isn't overtly metal. Do you know what I mean? Like there isn't like there isn't a metal style of riffing or playing. There is just this like this construction to it that I think again it just kind of opens the door for pretty much everywhere they go after this. Really comes from this album. I mean, this is a record that I've definitely talked to Scott about inducting into the Hall of Fame at some point.
I actually had the Mandela effect. I was looking for the Hall of Fame for this.
Oh yeah.
I honestly thought I had read one at one point, and I was like really frustrated. And I was like, "Where the fuck is the Evoken Hall of Fame?" Same with Winter. I thought there was a Winter Hall of Fame at one point, and I was
well,
like,
that one there's a holdout. There's some issues with that one. It
okay. But Steven didn't bring anything up, so I didn't push the issue.
I can't remember if it's the drummer or somebody who played keyboards on it. I don't remember. Scott would have the story.
It wouldn't be the keyboardist because that's who he's working with Godin.
Yeah,
and it's the drummer.
Yeah.
But it regardless, like that record, that's a Hall of Fame worthy record. We had considered it. I mean, I think even a couple of years ago, I talked to Scott about doing it this year because it's 2021. We're quickly running out of issues to get it in. So maybe I'll shoot him a text.
Well, I know John and Vince would be on board based on their participation with this, So
yeah, no, I'm sure we can get it together. But the record is completely worthy. It is. Yeah. It's a classic within the extreme doom and in my mind the death doom genre.
Absolutely.
Again, everything they have done in the past 20 years. It really it
comes with this record. Yep. Well, and one thing I wrote about this song, kind of thinking about, is that main riff. You kind of mentioned it's not a traditional riff. It just has so much provocation. It's just there's something just really I don't know. It just puts me in like a mood in a cool way. It's like got this dark atmosphere. Like you said, it's majestic in a sense, but I also think that like the diversity of the music and the mood changes is really refreshing for, I think, a genre that often kind of prides itself on kind of, repetitious, like anti-change, and to me, this song is nothing like that, so if someone was going to try and pigeonhole these guys as like Funeral Doom, I would play them a song like, I'd play them probably the two newest records, but I'd at the very least start with this song and be like, I don't know.
Like, there's like 4 different tempo changes and 4 different like bits to the song.
Yeah.
Which I'm a sucker for time changes in the middle of nowhere. Just like stop, do something else. Like if you can get 8 songs and condense it into one song, I'm all about it. More riffs, the better for me.
Well, and even like the stuff that Vince does with the double bass kicks that like kind of come about halfway through, that sort of leads to a whole bunch of like cool churning riffs in that second part.
That reminds me of when Jonas Renske from Catatonia was drumming.
Yeah,
and he would be off
on Brave Murder Day.
Time.
Yeah,
but I fucking loved it. I remember trying to play. I convinced a couple friends of mine. One of the dudes worked at a record or a music store selling instruments, and he was playing guitar, and I was trying to play that double bass
at the end of End Time.
At the end time, and he was just like, "This is like way off, man." I was like, "I know it's like you're kind of like building up your tension." And Vince is a much more, I would say, much more accomplished drummer, but he has those kind of like looseness things that I really am drawn to. The more clinical you make music, the less interested I am in it. Like I want to hear life behind stuff.
There's an organic kind of quality to it. And I think what's really interesting about the end of this song is, you get this kind of stop-start emotional tension that's building and building in the final act, and you're kind of begging for like release at that point, and you finally get it with like 30 seconds remaining. It's like, oh Jesus, finally. And it's cool. It's what you want, but man, it's like
trick that they never.
Yeah, it's like
do.
It's like neurosis type stuff, but
they do once every 30 years.
Yeah. But it's definitely a quintessential tune, so I think people who haven't heard this record or heard this song are in for a nice treat here. And then we move on to the first of 2 songs from Antithesis of Light, which again, 4-year gap, they're not touring much. They're, I'll read some interview clips later on, I think from Nick Orlando, where he kind of talks about the fact that this is very much not a full-time band at this point. They can't make it a full-time mix. They can't make a living off of it, and stuff.
I think that's to their benefit, though, because if they would have been making it as a living, they probably couldn't have done the records they did.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'd rather have guys that are doing this like as a really like in-depth hobby than like relying on it for income, because you're going to make, if I've got to do some jobs I don't want to do for income, but I don't ever have to like.
I've heard Decibel magazine is one.
They're
got to do it to live, man.
They're all right. They don't have I don't have a 401k or anything, but
man's got to eat.
Yeah, got to eat.
I can get a pizza every couple months.
Yeah, thanks.
But like I think having that kind of purity to be able to just focus on exactly what you want to do is like kind of a gift, and not a whole lot of bands that have been around that long actually have that opportunity to do that.
Yeah. There's no Evoken have no. I mean, they're bigger now than they've ever been, and it's still a pretty modest size. Yeah, and they've at no point has there ever been the, in air quotes, the Evoken like sellout moment or album. They have like they've stayed true without stagnating, and that's, to their credit as artists. That's not like, it's very difficult to have a career this long, and even if it is a part-time career, essentially, it's still like the band is never broken up.
Yeah,
the band has gone through lineup changes and everything that bands have been around this long endure, but there's never there's no weird period of Evoken. There's no era where you're kind of squinting to make sure that they're still an extreme band, or that they've that they haven't lost the plot or strayed from the path. It's like it's genuine from fucking day one to now.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing like the ultimate long game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the long game, Antithesis of Light, which even in the interview clips John alludes to as being maybe a little too long of a record. He kind of jokes he's never been able to really listen to this whole record from start to finish in one sitting, but he goes, I know that there's fans that do. I think this is, for me, and I've read that there's some diehard fans that think that this is like the peak for Evoken. And I think maybe those are more the Funeral Doom fans, perhaps. I'm speculating. I don't know. but you know, I missed this record even after Quietus, so I didn't really pick this up until after Atra Mors, and so I didn't maybe fully absorb this record the way maybe people did in 2005 or whatever. But I mean, it's certainly a nihilistic, existentialist kind of. It leaves you pretty empty, which I appreciate intellectually, but like it's. You know, it's a tough listen from start to finish. You know, picking out a song here and there, like we're going to play with in Solitary Rune and Antithesis of Light, is an easier listen for me. But I don't know, Albert, you were like well into them at this point. What was your take on this record?
I mean, again, this is a personal thing for me because this record's 2005, and
this is right at the start of Decibel, right?
Yeah, I'd started Decibel less than a year before this record came out, and I still was trying to figure out what I could and couldn't do with the magazine. You know, what kind of responsibilities I had to a readership, but also, you know, to myself. And, you know, when I made the decision, like, no, I want to do a feature on Evoken because I love this band and they're, you know, I think this record is great. You know, you have those kind of moments along the way where you kind of get comfortable with what you're doing and being able to say, okay, we can do an Evoken feature. I think I'm pretty sure it ran in the issue with like As I Lay Dying on the cover. So, you know, not so fucking brave of me overall. Let's, you know, I don't need to pat myself on the back here, but like the idea that like I could start doing those things and like really kind of embrace the things that were important to me in the magazine and not just like, you know, making sure that we had enough people picking up the magazine to sustain it through its first year.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I have those kind of fond nostalgic memories of that album, but I do think that album in that kind of mid-period, which, you know, their mid-period is really essentially just two records because this is the vocal pace that we move at. But they are
things go slow.
Yeah.
They're the two records that are like closest together chronologically and I think most similar stylistically, that being Antithesis and Caress of the Void. So they're kind of like sister records in my mind. But I do think that this one is there's something about this one that's, I think I used the word earlier, cavernous. It's just kind of darker you're just in a deeper hole that it's harder to dig out of. But I do think that the songs on that record are probably slightly catchier than they are on Caress of the Void.
I agree.
As far as, you know, that particular iteration of Evoken can be catchy. But I think both the title track and In Solitary Ruin are the ones that like resonate years later. I know that I've definitely heard them perform both live too over the years.
Okay.
So, you know, I think those dudes know like that those tracks
those are the two standouts.
They do work. But yeah, it is it's a darker hole that they've been in, or than they were ever in previously with this, than they had ever previously been in with the record. So I think in that sense, it's just kind of another step, and it's actually one of my favorite Evoken records.
Yeah, it's one I've like that's grown on me a lot. But I kind of understand what John's saying, that like it's a tough listen from start to finish, but picking it apart in chunks, like I really have learned to like appreciate individual songs and stuff like that. Do you listen to it from start to finish, like John's challenge, the we'll call it the Pepsi challenge, or is it something more you just hear kind of different parts of at different times, or?
You know, I'm probably not the right guy for that question. I don't know what records I listen to start to finish at this point.
Yeah.
Based on the
it's
way
like my life. Yeah.
But that is one, you know, back, you know, what is it now? 16 years ago.
2005. Yeah.
I played, religiously, and I have great regrets for not including it on our albums of the year list that year, because that was, again, kind of feeling out what you can and can't do.
Sure.
That fine line between what you bring as like kind of like
editorial voice,
but then I mean with as running a magazine in the past, much smaller than Decibel, like you've got to also advertising is what
Sure.
You've got people buying the magazine, but also you got to be it's capitalism.
Got to feed the monkey, as
Yes.
the Big Lebowski would say.
It wasn't even it wasn't even so much that, but like for me it was like Evoken was, and this is
Pretty far from what you guys were covering at that point, or
not even so much that, but like I always kind of felt that with the albums of the year list, it should kind of be a group voice in a lot of ways, and it wasn't necessarily like it was kind of like more of a consensus, and it wasn't until like a couple of years later where I realized no, it's not a consensus. It's like it's more about individual voices, everybody kind of having their say, and then me molding that into something.
Yeah.
And that is like, I'm pretty sure that like, and I can't remember, I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure I fucking put Across of the Void in the album in 2007 albums of the year list.
Jason probably has that in a.
I was going to say I'll check. I'll let you
database.
Yeah,
know.
if anybody knows, check it out. Consult the book.
Yeah.
I do have the issues in my office, so.
But they're in a big old pile.
But they're in a
not as
box right now,
organized.
yes.
You got to get them organized in order. Yeah.
But I think that again, and again, this is all just personal stuff, and I don't know if this resonates with anyone, and if it doesn't, I apologize. But like, it is like, as far as for me, it just kind of allowed me to move forward with like where I wanted the magazine to really go and be just kind of more honest with those things that I was super excited about, that I didn't necessarily feel that like 90% of the staff needed to be aware of or even fucking give a shit about. So, so those records, they're at a cool time for me. Like, it's like kind of Antithesis is like the beginnings of that, when I like allowed myself to say, okay, we can do features on Evoken, and I don't know who else could write it, so I'll just write it.
Yeah.
And then, to the point where a couple of years later, when you could give some kind of accolades near the end of the year and not feel weird that you were just imposing your own will, that you could do that. And also maybe it was okay to impose your own will at times. Maybe you do know something that's worth sharing. And I think that like those two records are kind of linked in that period for me. So, I know we haven't gotten
years of,
I know we haven't gotten to a Caress, and I will get there in
soon. The
5 hours,
5 to 6 hours. Yeah.
Right. But like
After our nap, we'll get there. Yeah.
No, I think you speak to, especially in the primordial days of Decibel, I mean, it was a weird landscape, in terms of like the zine world.
Like the first time I heard about, like, Chris brought up like copies of it, and I was like, there's a fucking Gothic Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
like, all right, I immediately
you knew how to hook us with Paradise Lost Hall of Fames.
That's all he needed, man.
Yeah, it's like breadcrumbs for us, man. Just,
right.
No, I have every single issue that's ever come out.
Let's not bring that up, Mark. Some of us are missing 5 issues.
You can go on eBay, right?
I have looked on eBay.
Really?
Yeah, I can't fucking find these. I've even reached out to this guy on the other end.
How many do you need?
5. I need 5.
Are they all the first 5?
No, I have like the first 5. That's the funny part. They're just like random issues
you're missing
in the
like
first,
the Josh Homme issue.
the Josh Homme issue. Yeah, there's just a.
Those aren't any bad.
No, I haven't found that one. So people love their Josh Homme shit, I guess.
Look at thriftbooks.com.
Okay,
you might be able to find some
keep
stuff on
poking
there.
around. At one point, Sarah Kitteringham was gonna she's like, oh, I have a bunch of extra ones. I'll get back to you. And I gave her the list, and then I kept bugging her, and she's like, oh, I'll look again. And it just never happened. I was like, damn it. That was like the closest I came to maybe she had the
We'll
issues.
find them
She didn't
someday.
know,
Maybe
so.
I'll scan some.
You know what?
Albert, who do you know? Come on, there's got to be some mafia guy that's got like the last box of
Nick Green
Decibel
has them all
somewhere.
at his house.
Yeah, come on, Nick.
Nick Green might have extra copies.
Yeah, maybe I'll reach out to
No,
Nick. So.
although I guarantee there's no way he's made it this far into this episode. So
No.
So you'll need to.
Yeah, I'll have to reach out to him on a personal level. He did wish me a happy birthday 2 days ago, so at least I've got that going for me.
I think he listened to the Slint episode all the way.
Yeah, he loved the Slint episode.
That was selfish.
So.
Yeah.
But so that's my endless journey, I guess, is to track those last few down. But
Got to have something to live for, dude.
hey, you gotta have goals. Gotta have something to live for. But what I had to say about In Solitary Ruin is I just said that the song kind of stands out a little bit, especially due to like the killer blast beats that Vince is sort of doing a little bit.
That's a kind of a first and unexpected little bit there.
Before it kind of crawls into the slow lumbering pits of hell that the rest of the album inhabits. So I thought that was kind of where I'm at with that. And Vince also, speaking of Vince, I have this Secret History Terrorizer Doom metal thing that I picked up for an exorbitant amount of money on eBay, Albert, that I'm embarrassed to tell you how much. But they do little like mini sub features on all the little subgenres, and they do talk about Evoken a bit in the Funeral Doom kind of little subgenre thing. And Vince kind of talks a little bit about the limitations of fandom in this scene and stuff. And it says, but Vince from Evoken doesn't see these limitations as a problem. He says, we have been able to establish ourselves over the 15 plus years we have been around. Even though we do have a smaller fan base than your stale death or black metal, we have built a certain fan base that support us year after year, release after release. So labels recognize this. Record labels contact us as fans of our music. They recognize that we are somewhat of a guaranteed sell for whatever that is worth this day and age. I think fans of the genre are not simply fair weather ones. They actually support the bands. Let's face it, a person who might be a fan of, say, Cannibal Corpse, it doesn't take much of an effort to find their music or find others that enjoy them. With Extreme Doom, it takes time, effort, and determination to seek out and find others of the same mindset. So in my opinion, a smaller fan base is more inclined to actually purchase the music of that Extreme Doom band. That was interesting. There's your take on...
This is the first time I've ever heard the term, and Albert said it as well, as Extreme Doom.
I like it. Let's tag it. Let's sell it. I mean, Mark and I are influencers on the internet, so we can really...
I've got almost 4,000 Instagram followers, so that's what's that.
So we'll sell this. We'll sell this hard, but I think that brings up a really good point about, like, these guys have just kind of scratched and clawed and kind of fought their way, especially from this like 98 to 2002 era. They're just kind of hanging in there, putting out these great releases.
I think,
and
it goes to the,
boom.
if you're true to yourself, eventually people will find it and they'll stay with you because it's honest.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. That's it.
You carve out a niche, and if it's genuine, it doesn't matter. Like, you will have people who support and believe and identify and connect. As long as your goal is to just do something genuine and you do a good job with it, people will find it.
Sure.
And it might not be like 1 million people. It might not be 100 people. But the people who find it will fucking get it. And fortunately, enough people have found Evoken to kind of help them sustain this for this long.
Mm-hmm. Well said. So let's do it. Let's get into in Pestilence Burning from Quietus, and then the first of two tunes that we'll hear from Antithesis of Light. We have In Solitary Ruin, and you'll hear a Vince clip and a John clip, and then we'll come back and chat more about this middle era that we're kind of talking about. So enjoy.
I think explaining is probably the worst thing you do. As to someone who has no idea the type of music you're enjoying or writing, what have you, trying to explain to them what something sounds like is a waste. It's a total waste of time. It's far better just hand them the music or point them in the direction to go listen to the music and let them create their own world in their mind and what they think it is. I think that serves a band better than trying to explain music to someone. It just doesn't make sense to me.